The night air was thick with tension. The wind swept across the military base, rustling dry leaves along the perimeter fence, and the dim floodlights cast long, uneven shadows that made the compound appear both eerie and alive. Captain Jonathan crouched behind a stack of crates, his finger poised on the trigger of his sidearm. He had been on countless missions, faced insurgents, and walked through fire zones that most officers wouldn't dare enter, yet this night felt different. There was an unfamiliar weight in the air, a silent warning that something extraordinary was about to unfold. He scanned the courtyard, eyes narrowing at a figure moving with deliberate precision. The intruder was clad in dark tactical gear, the uniform flawless, almost ceremonial in its precision. Every step was calculated, controlled, yet there was no hesitation in her movements. Instinct screamed that this was no ordinary threat. He knew trained operatives when he saw them, yet something about her radiated an authority, a quiet confidence that unsettled even him. His pulse quickened, and a bead of sweat traced a line down his temple. "Stop, identify yourself," barked, stepping from behind cover and raising his gun. The steel gleamed under the weak lighting, a reflection of both authority and threat. The figure froze, unflinching, as if expecting him. Her posture was impeccable, her hands relaxed but ready. There was no panic, no hesitation, only a silent command that spoke volumes. Heart raced as he pressed the barrel closer to her temple, every instinct telling him that a single misstep could turn deadly in an instant. The intruder's eyes, sharp and focused, met his, felt an odd mixture of fear and curiosity. These were not just the eyes of a soldier. They were the eyes of someone who had seen death up close and navigated it with flawless precision. The silence between them stretched, taut like a drawn bowstring, each second dragging into eternity. Had faced threats before, armed insurgents, spies, even the occasional rogue operative, but none had carried this aura. It was as if he were confronting a force of nature disguised as a human being. He studied her insignia, a subtle patch barely visible under the flickering light. It was unfamiliar, yet it felt significant. His mind raced, pulling up fragments of intelligence reports he had read, rumors whispered in briefing rooms, mentions of someone who operated beyond conventional rules, someone whose feats were almost legendary. Could it be? No, it wasn't possible. He had never seen her face. Yet the recognition was a spark, a whisper of something extraordinary he couldn't yet name. The wind shifted, carrying faint sounds of distant vehicles and the occasional call over the radio, but neither nor the intruder moved. It was as if the world had narrowed to the space between them, a bubble of tension where nothing else existed. Training urged him to act decisively, yet his instincts urged caution. This was not a situation that allowed hesitation, and yet hesitation seemed to be the choice. "You're not like the others," said, voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. The intruder didn't respond. Her calmness was infuriating. Every soldier he had trained or commanded would have faltered under this scrutiny. Fear, confusion, or even arrogance would have betrayed them. But she remained a study in composure, a silent storm coiled and ready. Realized that the true danger was not in her weapon. It was in her presence, in the quiet certainty of her being. Memories flashed in mind, brief glimpses of missions past, of men and women who had faced impossible odds and failed. And now, here was someone who exuded mastery over chaos, someone who seemed untouchable, untethered by the limitations that bound ordinary operatives. His mind spun with questions, tactical calculations, and warnings. Could he really trust what he saw? Could someone move through this base, past every surveillance system, every security protocol, and remain undetected if they were not extraordinary? The figure shifted slightly, enough to reveal a glimpse of something on her wrist, a small, intricate insignia that caught the light just long enough for her to recognize its significance. His pulse quickened. There it was, the unmistakable mark of someone renowned in intelligence circles, someone whose operations were whispered about in hushed tones by the highest-ranking officers. This was no ordinary intruder. This was someone whose name carried weight, whose reputation could inspire awe or terror depending on who witnessed it. Finger wavered on the trigger, the weight of authority pressing down on him. He was a seasoned captain, confident in his decision-making, yet the instinct screaming in his head refused to be silenced. "Identify yourself," he repeated, voice firmer this time, yet laced with curiosity he could not hide. The figure tilted her head slightly, acknowledging him, a faint trace of a smile brushing her lips, not mocking but knowing, almost approving. Time seemed to slow. Every rustle of wind, every distant sound realized he was holding a gun to someone whose very presence demanded respect, whose skill and reputation could eclipse his own. Fear was no longer about personal safety. It was awe, tinged with disbelief. He was witnessing history in motion, standing on the precipice of a revelation that could change everything he thought he knew about the world he served. The intruder's calmness remained unbroken. Her eyes scanned the perimeter briefly, calculating, analyzing, then returned to. There was no threat in her gaze, only a quiet challenge, a test of judgment. Felt the weight of every decision he had made in his career, every choice that had led him to this moment. And then it clicked. Recognition, sudden and undeniable, shot through him like lightning. He knew who she was. The realization hit him with a mix of fear, awe, and relief. He was facing Riley Morgan, the legendary Navy SEAL whose name had become synonymous with impossible missions, flawless execution, and unmatched courage. The woman before him was not just an operative, she was a living legend, a shadow who had walked through death countless times and emerged unscathed. Lowered his weapon slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing, though not completely gone. Respect and disbelief warred within him. Riley Morgan spoke for the first time, her voice calm, measured, and authoritative. "Captain," she said, her tone carrying the weight of command, experience, and certainty. "We don't have much time. Follow my lead." Mind reeled. The standoff that had seemed like life and death was now the beginning of something far larger, a mission that would challenge everything he thought he knew about courage, leadership, and the extraordinary feats a single human could achieve. The night air remained heavy, but now it was charged with possibility. Gun still in hand but trembling less, nodded subtly. For the first time he felt the magnitude of the moment, not as an officer in command, but as a witness to history, standing on the edge of a story few would believe. And as Riley Morgan moved forward with the calm assurance of someone who had conquered the impossible countless times before, realized he was no longer the one in control. For once, he was following a legend. The soft hum of the base's floodlights did little to illuminate the past that lingered in Riley Morgan's mind. Captain trailed a few steps behind her, still shaken by the standoff moments ago. He had been trained to assess threats, to act decisively, yet here he was, following someone whose reputation alone could command armies. Riley moved like a shadow, each step silent, each motion calculated. But while her focus was on the mission at hand, her mind flashed back to the journey that had forged her into the legend she was today. Riley's story began long before the military ever touched her life. Born in a small town, she had shown an early aptitude for strategy and physical endurance, often outrunning boys twice her age in neighborhood games and solving puzzles adults deemed impossible. Her mother had been a nurse, her father a retired Marine, and from them, Riley had inherited both discipline and compassion. She excelled academically, but felt constrained by the quiet rhythms of small-town life. She craved challenges, intensity, and above all, a sense of purpose that ordinary life could not provide. At 18, Riley enlisted. The decision shocked her family, but they understood. She had always been determined to live on the edge of what others deemed possible. The training was merciless. Her first year at Bud-S basic underwater demolition SEAL training pushed her to the edge of human endurance. Cold, wet, sleep-deprived, and tested relentlessly, Riley endured when others broke. Every obstacle became a lesson, every failure a stepping stone. She absorbed each challenge with a quiet intensity, her resolve sharpening like steel forged in fire. By the time she graduated, she was not just strong, she was unstoppable. Her early missions were equally grueling. Deployed to conflict zones that were hotbeds of chaos and danger, Riley quickly distinguished herself. In one operation in the Middle East, a hostage situation required the SEAL team to navigate an urban maze filled with insurgents. Riley led the breach, neutralizing threats with surgical precision, freeing hostages while sustaining minimal team exposure. Her courage under fire and calculated decisions became legendary among her peers. Stories of her exploits spread quickly, though the public would never know the full extent of her actions. For every mission that made headlines, there were 10 more that remained classified, whispers in military corridors, tales of a ghost who struck swiftly and disappeared without trace. Riley's ability was not just in combat, it was in anticipation, in reading people, situations, and patterns that others missed. Intelligence gathering, undercover operations, tactical negotiations, she excelled in all. She had infiltrated terrorist networks, dismantled smuggling rings, and executed recon missions deep behind enemy lines. Each operation tested her limits, forcing her to adapt in ways most soldiers could not comprehend. By the time she reached the rank of lieutenant commander, Riley's name carried weight, even in the highest echelons of military intelligence. She was a living legend, not just for her skill but for her relentless determination to redefine the boundaries of what a SEAL could achieve. Tonight's mission was no different. As she guided through the compound, every instinct she had honed over years of covert operations guided her steps. The base was heavily guarded, a labyrinth of checkpoints, surveillance cameras, and armed personnel. Most intruders would have been detected immediately, but Riley moved with a silence that seemed supernatural. Tried to match her pace, but he felt like a novice student shadowing a master. Every motion, every decision was precise, efficient, and executed with lethal grace. Riley's mind briefly revisited one of her earliest high-profile missions, a rescue operation in hostile territory where intelligence had indicated multiple hostages were held by a well-armed militant group. The mission required a delicate balance of aggression and subtlety. Moving through the night, Riley and her team had neutralized guards silently, mapped escape routes, and extracted hostages without alerting the enemy. The operation was considered near impossible, but it had been a textbook success. Moments like that had built her legend. Could sense it now, though he had only witnessed the calm exterior. He had yet to grasp the depth of experience beneath it. Her reputation, however, had not come without sacrifice. Riley had endured injuries, betrayal, and the constant weight of secrecy. Most civilians could never understand the cost of being invisible while performing acts that could save hundreds of lives. She had lost teammates, survived ambushes, and carried the emotional burden of impossible decisions. And yet through it all, she remained steadfast, guided by discipline, integrity, and a singular focus on mission success. Tonight, those same traits were keeping them alive in the shadows of the base. Stole a glance at her. Even in the dim lighting, he noticed the subtle signs of fatigue masked by rigorous control. The slight tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes scanned corners and shadows. He realized that every action was intentional, each movement a product of years of training and experience. She wasn't just walking through the base. She was mapping it in her mind, calculating threats, escape routes, contingencies, all in real time. And she did it without a hint of hesitation, as though danger were a companion rather than a threat. "You've handled things differently than anyone I've seen," whispered, his voice low. He struggled to hide his awe even as his instincts urged caution. Riley did not answer immediately. Instead, she paused briefly, assessing his comprehension of the stakes. Then softly, with the faintest edge of humor in her tone, she replied, "That's the point, Captain. Ordinary approaches don't solve extraordinary problems." Nodded, though inwardly he felt the weight of those words. He realized he was not just observing a legendary SEAL. He was participating in a live demonstration of excellence, courage, and strategic brilliance. Every motion, every decision she made spoke of someone who had spent years living at the edge, who had stared death in the face and returned, unshaken, undaunted, and unbroken. They moved deeper into the base. Riley's eyes flicked constantly, scanning windows, listening for footsteps, anticipating patrol shifts. Still armed, followed her instructions to the letter, amazed at her ability to maintain control over the environment and him, all without raising her voice. She had an uncanny ability to read people in seconds, assess threats, and make decisions that balanced risk with precision. For this was more than awe-inspiring, it was intimidating. A memory flashed across Riley's mind. A high-altitude parachute jump into hostile territory, night vision goggles revealing enemy positions in ghostly green hues. The mission had required instantaneous decision-making, coordination with a team she barely knew, and improvisation under fire. She had succeeded, of course. Every operation, every success had honed her instincts, sharpened her judgment, and the reputation that now preceded her. Tonight, that same skill was saving lives, starting with Own. As they reached a secure perimeter checkpoint, Riley motioned for her to stay back. Silently, she disabled sensors, checked blind spots, and cleared a path, watched in disbelief, realizing the depth of her experience. His training, years of service, and tactical knowledge were overshadowed by the sheer mastery Riley demonstrated effortlessly. This was the reality of standing beside a legend. Every move, every decision, a lesson in precision and courage. For the awe was compounded by the knowledge that he had been seconds away from a tragic misjudgment. Had he acted on instinct alone during the initial standoff, history could have taken a very different turn. He now understood that the woman before him was not just extraordinary. She was the embodiment of excellence in motion, a living testament to what humans could achieve under extreme discipline and relentless training. As they paused briefly behind cover, Riley glanced at with a knowing expression. "Stay alert. This is only the beginning," she said. Her voice was calm, yet every syllable carried the weight of experience, command, and quiet authority. Nodded, still absorbing the enormity of the revelation. He was now working with Riley Morgan, the legendary Navy SEAL whose feats were whispered about in military circles, a woman who had rewritten the boundaries of possibility, and whose presence would forever change his understanding of courage, skill, and heroism. Captain Jonathan felt the weight of the moment like never before. Even as he followed Riley Morgan through the shadowed corridors of the base, a gnawing tension lingered, refusing to release its grip. Every step he took was deliberate, calculated, yet instinctively cautious. His gun, still in hand, seemed heavier than usual, as if acknowledging the presence of someone whose skill far exceeded his own. The earlier standoff replayed in his mind, the seconds stretching like an eternity. How could he have almost pulled the trigger on someone whose very presence demanded awe rather than aggression? Riley moved with a fluid precision that was hypnotic. She scanned every corner, every doorway, every reflective surface with a sharpness that suggested the ability to anticipate threats before they even materialized. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, caught subtle shifts in the shadows. A faint rustle of a curtain, a distant metallic click, even the subtle vibrations of the floor beneath their boots, all registered instantly, cataloged and acted upon. Was acutely aware that he was witnessing the embodiment of elite military training, a level of awareness he had only read about in classified reports. "Captain," Riley whispered, halting briefly behind a reinforced supply container, "you need to stay close and follow my instructions exactly. Do not make any sudden moves." Her calm voice carried authority that brooked no hesitation, yet it held a measured patience. Nodded, swallowing the rising knot of adrenaline in his throat. He had been trained to command, to lead, and yet, in this moment, he realized he was a student following the lead of a master. His mind raced back to every intelligence briefing he had attended over the years, the subtle murmurs about Riley Morgan, the SEAL who had performed the impossible, the operative who had vanished behind enemy lines, leaving chaos in her wake while achieving objectives that others deemed unattainable. Her reputation was legendary, yet he had never imagined encountering her face to face. And now, every instinct in his body screamed caution, respect, and disbelief simultaneously. The tension in the base was palpable. Guards patrolled sporadically, unaware of the shadows moving past them. Security cameras swept in wide arcs, their infrared lenses revealing nothing more than two figures blending seamlessly with the darkness. Marveled at Riley's ability to remain unseen, her every action executed with minimal noise and maximum efficiency. Each movement demonstrated not just skill, but experience honed over years of life-or-death situations. He understood now why so many whispered her name in reverence and awe. They reached a narrow corridor lined with crates and equipment. Riley motioned for her to crouch behind a stack of supplies while she checked the far end. In a fluid motion, she slipped through the shadows, her movements almost ghost-like. Straining to follow, caught a glimpse of her tactical instincts at work. Subtle shifts of weight, a careful calculation of angles, and the constant evaluation of possible threats. Every breath she took seemed synchronized with the environment, a silent dance of survival and dominance. As she returned, her expression unreadable, felt the weight of realization pressing down on him. This was no ordinary operative. This was someone who had survived situations most soldiers only read about in reports. Someone whose decisions had saved countless lives, whose judgment had altered the outcomes of missions in ways the public would never know. Every second he spent observing her reinforced the notion that he was in the presence of a legend. "Captain," Riley said quietly, crouching beside him, "you're doing fine, but don't forget, the moment we hesitate, the advantage is lost. Remember your training, but let instincts guide you too." Nodded, the words settling into his mind. He had been taught to trust instinct, yet in this scenario, instinct alone would not suffice. Here was someone whose instincts were unparalleled, whose experience rendered conventional tactics almost secondary. He realized that survival tonight depended on his ability to follow, observe, and learn. A sudden sound, a faint metallic scraping, caused both of them to freeze. Riley's head turned sharply, eyes scanning the area in microseconds, could barely follow the speed of her perception. Her hand moved instinctively, adjusting her sidearm, ready to neutralize any potential threat. The seconds stretched, each heartbeat amplified in the silence. And then, just as quickly, the sound ceased, leaving only the echo of tension in the narrow corridor. Exhaled slowly, his respect for Riley's abilities deepening with every passing moment. As they proceeded, Riley shared fragments of tactical advice, her tone calm and measured, yet carrying authority. "Notice the patterns," she whispered, indicating the patrol route of a distant guard. "Notice how he moves when he pauses and where blind spots appear. In a moment, you'll see why it matters." Followed her instructions, observing as she demonstrated the art of anticipation, a skill that went far beyond what he had learned in decades of training. Every detail mattered, every movement had a purpose, and every decision could mean life or death. His mind wandered briefly to the standoff earlier. The memory of pressing his gun to Riley's head, now tinged with disbelief, replayed vividly. He had almost committed a mistake that could have altered the course of history. Yet, even in that split second, her calm composure had been unwavering, her confidence unshaken. It dawned on him that this was a person who thrived under pressure, who viewed danger as a puzzle to be solved rather than a threat to be feared. He realized the depth of what he had witnessed, the embodiment of courage, skill, and strategic brilliance. A flicker of movement in the shadows caught his attention. Riley signaled him to freeze and crouch lower. Her hand pointed subtly, indicating a narrow passageway where sensors had been disabled, allowing them to advance undetected. Marveled at her foresight. She had calculated every possibility, anticipated every obstacle, and prepared contingencies before they even entered the corridor. Her mastery over the environment was absolute. Every step, every adjustment, reinforced the legend he now followed, and felt both humbled and inspired. Riley paused, glancing at him briefly, her expression unreadable but commanding. "Stay focused," she said. "We're almost at the objective. Remember, hesitation is fatal." Nodded again, the words sinking deep. He understood now that survival was not just about strength or courage. It was about observation, adaptability, and the ability to trust someone whose skill surpassed his own. He had spent years commanding, making split-second decisions, yet tonight he was learning from a master. As they reached a junction leading to the inner section of the base, the tension escalated further. Felt every nerve in his body alert, every instinct screaming caution. Yet he also felt a strange exhilaration, the thrill of following someone extraordinary, of witnessing brilliance in motion, of participating in an operation guided by a legend. He realized that while he had faced danger before, this was different. The stakes were higher, the skill level unprecedented, and the opportunity to learn from Riley Morgan unparalleled. Riley moved first, checking the perimeter with her usual meticulous precision. Followed, careful not to make unnecessary noise. The hallway stretched before them, silent except for their measured footsteps and the occasional distant echo of a patrol. Couldn't help but reflect on the legend of Riley Morgan, the missions that had saved lives, the impossible odds she had overcome, the quiet heroism that had gone unseen by the public. Now he was witnessing it firsthand. "Captain," Riley said softly, pausing, "never forget, control the moment or it will control you." Her eyes met his, steady and unwavering. Felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. He understood now that true mastery was not just physical skill. It was mental clarity, anticipation, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. For the first time, he recognized the difference between a good operative and a legend. The hallway ahead remained quiet, shadows stretching like fingers along the walls. Still alert, followed Riley's lead, every sense heightened. He knew that the tension was far from over, that each step brought them closer to danger, and that every decision mattered. Yet in that moment, he also knew he was witnessing something extraordinary, a living legend in action, someone who redefined courage, skill, and human capability. And as they advanced deeper into the base, realized a simple truth. He was no longer just an officer following orders. He was learning, growing, and surviving because of the woman beside him, the legendary Navy SEAL whose very presence commanded respect, fear, and awe in equal measure. The tension was far from over, but he also knew that with Riley Morgan leading the way, survival was not just possible, it was inevitable. The corridors of the base stretched endlessly ahead, dimly lit and silent except for the echo of Captain Cautious steps. Behind him, Riley Morgan moved like a shadow, completely at ease despite the high-alert environment. Marveled at her confidence, her every motion a testament to years of elite training and battlefield experience. And as he followed, Riley's mind drifted momentarily into the memories that had forged her into the legend she had become, the missions that had tested her courage, skill, and humanity in ways few could comprehend. Her first high-stakes operation had occurred shortly after her deployment overseas. Intelligence had reported a militant stronghold deep in hostile territory, a fortress nearly impossible to infiltrate. She and her SEAL team had been tasked with rescuing hostages before the situation escalated into disaster. Riley had led the initial reconnaissance, slipping through enemy lines under the cover of darkness. Every step was calculated. Shadows, patrol schedules, even the tiniest creak of floorboards had to be accounted for. She had memorized layouts, anticipated enemy behavior, and developed contingency plans before the mission even began. The night of the operation, Riley had moved silently through the compound, neutralizing guards without firing a single shot. Each maneuver was precise, each decision informed by instinct and experience. She had reached the hostages, location moments before the enemy realized the breach. Chaos erupted only briefly as the team executed the extraction. Every hostage was brought to safety, every insurgent neutralized or contained, and not a single civilian harmed. The mission had been deemed nearly impossible, yet it became a textbook example of tactical brilliance. In quiet moments afterward, her team had regarded her with awe, though publicly, no one knew the full extent of her actions. Riley's brilliance extended beyond direct combat. Intelligence operations often required subtlety, patience, and ingenuity. In one mission, she had infiltrated a high-level terrorist network posing as a contractor, gathering actionable intelligence over weeks without raising suspicion. Each meeting, each observation, had been meticulously documented, feeding critical information back to command. The success of the mission had prevented a catastrophic attack and saved hundreds of lives. Few knew how close she had come to discovery. One wrong move, one miscalculated word could have been fatal. And yet, Riley had emerged unscathed, her cover intact, her objectives achieved flawlessly. There were missions that demanded improvisation under extreme pressure. She remembered a high-altitude parachute jump into hostile territory with equipment failures and shifting weather conditions. The team had to adapt instantly, calculating descent trajectories, navigating hazardous terrain, and neutralizing unexpected threats. Riley's mind had raced through countless contingencies, every decision weighted with life-or-death stakes. By the time they completed the operation, they had not only succeeded, but had also set a new standard for precision and adaptability in extreme conditions. Such feats became part of her legend, whispered about in briefings and after-action reports, though largely unknown to the public. Her reputation was built not just on skill, but on leadership under pressure. In one firefight, a squad under her command had been pinned down by an enemy ambush. Communication lines were compromised, reinforcements delayed. Riley had remained calm, issuing concise commands and moving through enemy fire to reorganize her team. She neutralized threats, repositioned units, and turned a potentially disastrous situation into a tactical victory. Her leadership had been decisive, her judgment flawless. Those who had fought alongside her often described the feeling as both terrifying and inspiring, terrifying because of the danger, inspiring because of her unwavering courage. Riley's operations were also notable for their moral complexity. Missions often required difficult decisions, balancing the safety of civilians, the strategic objectives, and the lives of her team. In one urban mission, she had encountered a group of hostiles holding civilians as shields. Direct engagement risked civilian lives, yet inaction would allow the threat to persist. Riley had devised a maneuver that separated hostiles from civilians, neutralizing the threat while minimizing collateral damage. The mission had been hailed within military intelligence as brilliant, though its nuances were classified and unspoken outside command circles. Her physical training was legendary, yet equally matched by mental discipline. Riley had endured grueling conditions, ice-cold waters, desert heat, sleep deprivation, while maintaining strategic clarity. Every obstacle was a test not just of endurance, but of adaptability. She had learned to remain calm under extreme stress, to read patterns and predict behavior, and to anticipate consequences several moves ahead. These were not just survival skills. They were the foundation of a career that had transformed her into someone capable of influencing events on a scale few could imagine. Through all these missions, Riley had developed a unique synergy with her team. Trust, respect, and seamless coordination were essential. She had inspired loyalty not through force, but through competence, decisiveness, and calm authority. Those who had worked with her often spoke of an unspoken understanding. Riley Morgan's presence elevated every mission, reassured those around her, and demanded that they rise to the challenge. For trailing her silently through the base, the effect was immediate. He was witnessing history in motion, learning firsthand why her legend endured. Even in the quiet moments between operations, Riley's mind was never idle. She analyzed failures, learned from mistakes, and developed innovative techniques to anticipate threats. Her strategic mind turned every experience into an advantage, every encounter into preparation for the next challenge. It was this relentless pursuit of excellence, this refusal to accept mediocrity, that had made her one of the most respected and feared SEALs in the world. Each memory she revisited now reminded her of why she could not fail tonight. Every life, including, depended on precision, anticipation, and courage. Returning to the present, Riley glanced at, nodding both his awe and the tension in his posture. "Captain," she said softly, "every decision we make tonight carries weight. Watch carefully, trust your instincts, but know that hesitation can cost lives." Her words, calm yet commanding, reinforced the lessons she had learned over countless missions. Nodded, absorbing every nuance, realizing that he was participating in something extraordinary. He was no longer merely an officer performing his duty. He was observing a living legend, a master strategist, and a warrior whose actions had shaped history in silence. Riley led the way with quiet authority, every movement deliberate, every decision informed by years of experience. Followed, understanding more fully why her reputation was well-earned. He recalled the stories he had read, the briefings he had attended, the whispered legends, and now he was living the reality. Each flashback Riley had relived internally informed her present actions, allowing her to navigate the base with unmatched precision. Began to grasp the weight of history in motion, and the extraordinary skills of the woman guiding him through the shadows. The tension of the base, the shadows, and the unknown threats ahead became secondary to the awe-felt. Every corner revealed Riley's expertise, disabled sensors, silent neutralization of mechanical obstacles, and flawless navigation of blind spots. He realized that his respect for her went beyond professional admiration. It was awe for a person who had mastered the impossible, who had survived the unthinkable, and whose calm under pressure had turned impossible missions into legendary victories. And as they moved deeper into the base, silently vowed to carry the lessons of this night forever. He understood now that a true legend was not merely defined by past accolades, but by the quiet, constant excellence demonstrated in moments of extreme danger. Riley Morgan was that legend, a living embodiment of courage, intellect, and discipline, and for witnessing it firsthand was both terrifying and humbling. The base stretched in eerie silence, corridors winding like veins through the steel heart of the compound. Captain Jonathan's pulse still raced, though the initial shock of encountering the intruder had begun to transform into something else: comprehension. Each step he took behind Riley Morgan reinforced the realization that he was no longer facing a typical operative. Her movements, precise and deliberate, her calm awareness of every detail, and the quiet authority she projected all pointed to a level of expertise that few had ever witnessed. It was the subtle indicators that first triggered recognition. The faint insignia on her tactical gear, almost imperceptible in the dim light, drew his attention. His military mind raced, connecting fragments of memory and intelligence reports. Riley Morgan, Lieutenant Commander Riley Morgan, the Navy SEAL whose name was whispered with awe in intelligence briefings, the operative responsible for feats so daring they were almost mythic. His heart pounded as the pieces fell into place. He had almost engaged her as a threat, a grave mistake that now seemed unthinkable. Riley Morgan, whispered under his breath, his voice barely audible over the hum of the base's lighting systems. His eyes met hers briefly, searching for confirmation. The slightest curve of her lips, a subtle glint in her eyes, indicated that she had heard him, that she was aware he now understood. It was not a confrontation anymore. It was a moment of recognition, a turning point where tension began to yield to understanding. Riley did not boast. She never did. But in that moment, her calm, measured acknowledgement of his recognition carried a quiet authority that left in awe. She had navigated countless life-or-death scenarios, survived ambushes, and executed missions deemed impossible. And now, here she was, standing mere feet away, the living embodiment of the legends he had only read about. His respect deepened, mingling with a sense of humility and unexpectedly relief. The realization brought with it a flood of questions. How had she penetrated this base undetected? What was her objective? And how many lives, including his own, hung in the balance based solely on her skill and judgment? Had faced threats before, had commanded troops under fire, and had walked into ambushes without flinching. But this was different. This was a person whose decisions had consequences far beyond the ordinary, whose mastery of tactics, stealth, and strategy made every previous mission he had led seem conventional by comparison. Riley motioned him to pause, her eyes scanning the corridor ahead with unwavering focus. "Captain, we don't have much time. Recognition is one thing, action is another. Follow my lead and trust your training," she said softly. The words were both directive and reassuring. Nodded, still grappling with the awe that washed over him. He had trained for years to respond to high-pressure situations. Yet here he was, realizing that survival depended not just on his training, but on his ability to defer to someone whose skill was virtually unmatched. The subtlety of Riley's leadership struck him. She did not dominate or intimidate. She commanded through competence, through the sheer force of her skill, her judgment, and her calm authority. Every movement, every glance, every decision was deliberate, a lesson in control and strategic thinking. Could see why her reputation had become legend. It was not built on arrogance or showmanship, but on flawless execution under the most extreme circumstances. As they advanced through a narrow hallway, his mind replayed past briefings and intelligence memos. Riley Morgan's name had been associated with hostage rescues in hostile urban environments, covert operations behind enemy lines, and extraordinary feats of tactical innovation. Her missions often carried the weight of national security and the lives of countless civilians. He had never expected to encounter her personally, and now that he had, he understood the gravity of the situation in a visceral way. "Captain," Riley murmured, nodding his contemplation, "recognition is not enough. Focus. Anticipate. Every step we take could be the difference between success and failure." Her voice was calm, but every word carried the authority of someone who had stared danger in the face countless times and emerged unscathed. Straightened, aligning his instincts with hers. He was no longer merely observing a legend. He was participating in her operation, learning, adapting, and surviving under her guidance. The shift in dynamic was subtle but profound. Where earlier there had been tension, now there was a sense of partnership. Could sense Riley assessing him, not as a subordinate but as an ally capable of following instructions and executing decisions under pressure. He realized that trust was essential, that hesitation or arrogance could prove fatal. This was the first lesson in working alongside someone of her caliber. Competence inspired respect, and respect ensured survival. As they approached a junction leading deeper into the base, understanding of Riley's legend deepened. He noticed the faint way she adjusted her stance when crossing sensor-heavy zones, the precision with which she avoided detection, the foresight in anticipating patrol patterns. Every motion was in stealth and tactical awareness. Had encountered elite operatives before, but none moved with this combination of skill, experience, and quiet authority. A memory surfaced, an intelligence briefing he had attended months prior, in which Riley Morgan's name had been mentioned in a hushed, almost reverent tone. At the time, it had seemed abstract, almost like a story from a military myth. Now, standing just feet away from her, witnessing her operate in real time, could comprehend why her legend had endured. Every detail of her conduct, every subtle action, validated the tales he had once considered exaggerated. She was living proof of human capability at its peak. The recognition transformed his approach. No longer did he act purely from instinct. Now he observed, aligned, and learned. He mirrored her movements, but more importantly, he absorbed the methodology behind them: patience, anticipation, precision, and the ability to adapt instantaneously. Riley was not just leading him through the base. She was teaching, demonstrating, and elevating his understanding of tactical operations. Each step became a lesson in mastery, every moment a glimpse into why she had achieved legendary status. Riley spoke again, her tone quiet but resolute. "Captain, once recognition is complete, action begins. Remember, hesitation will cost lives, including our own. Trust your instincts but defer to experience when in doubt." Nodded, understanding the duality of her message. Recognition of skill and experience was essential, but so too was maintaining his own initiative. It was a delicate balance, one that few could achieve under extreme pressure. He realized that he was learning from one of the finest operators in history, and that knowledge was as vital as his weapon. The corridor stretched before them, each shadow and angle now a lesson in observation. could see why Riley's missions had become legendary. The combination of calm under pressure, tactical brilliance, and the ability to anticipate the unpredictable. He understood now that legends were not created by luck or brute force, but by relentless discipline, intelligence, and an unwavering focus on mission success. And he also understood the weight of being in her presence. Every action mattered, every decision carried consequences, and survival depended on alignment, trust, and courage. A sudden faint click of a lock behind a door caught their attention. Froze, heart pounding, ready for confrontation. Riley's hand moved subtly, adjusting her stance, scanning angles, and assessing the situation with surgical precision. Her eyes met his briefly, a silent signal to remain calm, to trust her judgment. Felt a strange mix of fear and admiration. Fear for the danger that could emerge at any moment. Admiration for the calm control Riley exhibited even in potential chaos. Finally spoke, his voice low and reverent. I understand now. You're the legend. I know who you are. Riley's lips curved into the faintest hint of acknowledgement, but there was no pride, no arrogance. Instead, there was only a quiet resolve, a readiness to act, and a command to remain vigilant. Recognition had been achieved, but the work, the danger, the mission was far from over. And in that silent, tense corridor, a partnership was forged, had moved from tension and uncertainty to respect, understanding, and trust. He knew that following Riley Morgan was not just a matter of obedience. It was a lesson in survival, in courage, and an immersion into the skill of one of the world's most legendary Navy SEALs. The recognition of her identity had shifted the dynamic entirely, turning a standoff into an alliance that would carry them both through the dangers yet to come. The dim corridor stretched before them, lit only by intermittent overhead lights that flickered like a warning. Captain Jonathan followed Riley Morgan closely, every sense heightened. Recognition had transformed tension into cautious respect, and now a fragile alliance had begun to form. Had shifted from fear to understanding. He was no longer facing a threat, but an extraordinary operative whose mastery of strategy and combat was unmatched. Every step with Riley was a lesson in precision, awareness, and adaptability, and knew he had to absorb every detail to survive the night. Riley motioned toward a tactical map displayed on a small digital interface built into the wall of the corridor. The map glowed faintly, outlining the perimeter, patrol routes, and sensor arrays of the base. Leaned in, studying the data. Riley's finger traced the path they would take, highlighting blind spots and escape routes. "We have one chance," she said, her tone calm but unwavering. "Deviation will put lives at risk. Every step matters. You follow my lead and stay alert. Understand?" Nodded, gripping his weapon. The gravity of the mission was crystal clear. Any misstep could be fatal. Riley outlined the plan with meticulous precision. They would move through the western wing of the base, avoiding main patrol routes, disabling sensors, and using shadows and cover to advance undetected. Marveled at her foresight. She had anticipated contingencies he had never considered, calculated probabilities with exacting detail, and designed the mission to minimize risk while maximizing their advantage. Her strategies were not just about action. They were about anticipation, prediction, and the subtle manipulation of every variable in the environment. "Captain," Riley said, her eyes locking onto his, "you need to remember, leadership is situational. You may be trained, but tonight my experience takes priority. Trust it. Follow instructions precisely and act only when instructed. Hesitation or improvisation could be deadly." Swallowed hard, understanding the truth of her words. He had commanded teams, faced insurgents, and survived hostile engagements, but this was a different level. He was not just participating in a mission. He was learning from one of the most skilled operators alive. The first segment of the plan required them to navigate a narrow supply corridor monitored by infrared sensors. Riley moved first, her body low and controlled, hands adjusting tactical equipment as she calculated distance, angles, and timing. Mirrored her movements, tense but focused, aware that even a single misstep could trigger an alarm. Riley's mastery was evident in every motion. She neutralized sensors silently, anticipated patrol patterns, and guided with subtle signals rather than words. The corridor, which had seemed impenetrable moments ago, now became a lesson in stealth and observation. As they reached the end of the corridor, a distant metallic scrape echoed through the hall. Riley froze, her instincts instantly analyzing the sound, calculating its origin and anticipating potential threats. Followed her lead, holding his breath, eyes scanning shadows for the slightest movement. Moments later, the sound ceased. Riley's hand signaled that it was safe to move forward. Felt a surge of admiration. Her ability to process information, anticipate threats, and respond with absolute calm under pressure was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Riley's mind, however, was already several steps ahead. She was analyzing every variable, guard rotations, camera angles, potential reinforcements, and environmental factors like lighting, sound, and cover. Every move she made was informed by decades of experience, from the intense physical training at Bud S to high-stakes missions behind enemy lines. Her mastery of tactics and strategy was not just skill, it was instinct honed by countless life-or-death situations. Realized that following her was not just about survival, it was about absorbing knowledge that could redefine his understanding of leadership and courage. They reached the junction leading to the intersection of the base. Riley paused, crouching behind a supply crate and gesturing for to do the same. Her eyes scanned the area in microseconds, evaluating threats and calculating safe pathways. Tried to follow her calculations mentally, but he quickly realized that her mind operated on a level far beyond his own. He was learning to trust not just her skills, but her judgment, understanding that her experience allowed her to anticipate danger before it emerged. "Stay close," Riley whispered. "The next segment is the most dangerous. We'll need to move through a hall monitored by both guards and cameras. Timing is everything." Nodded, gripping his weapon and matching her rhythm. The hallway ahead was narrow, the floor reflective, and the lighting harsh. Every step required precision, every movement had to be deliberate. Riley's presence was both calming and intimidating. She projected confidence that reassured, yet reminded him of the stakes involved. They advanced silently, shadows guiding them. Riley's body moved with the fluidity of someone who had mastered every aspect of stealth and combat. Mirrored her as best he could, following instructions, observing her methods, and internalizing the decisions that allowed her to remain undetected. He realized that survival in extreme conditions required more than physical skill. It required anticipation, strategic thinking, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. Riley all of these qualities flawlessly. As they navigated the final stretch of the hallway, a guard appeared unexpectedly, rounding a corner. Riley reacted instantly, her movements precise and controlled. Within seconds, she neutralized the threat silently, using her environment and body mechanics with deadly efficiency. Watched in disbelief, understanding that he was witnessing the application of skills that most soldiers could only dream of mastering. Her timing, judgment, and execution were flawless, leaving him both awed and inspired. Once the threat was neutralized, Riley motioned to continue. They entered a control room where they could monitor the next stage of the operation. Took a moment to process the sequence of events. He had seen firsthand the skills that had earned Riley Morgan her legendary status, and now he was part of her mission. Recognition had shifted to partnership, tension had shifted to mutual respect, and a fragile alliance had under the pressure of shared danger. Riley reviewed the layout and explained the final objectives. Listened intently, understanding that the success of the mission, and their survival, depended entirely on precise execution. Riley's strategies combined stealth, timing, and anticipation, all informed by her extensive field experience. Realized that following her was not a limitation. It was an opportunity to learn, adapt, and survive under the guidance of someone who had mastered the impossible. The alliance between them was now fully formed. Trusted Riley's judgment implicitly, and Riley had assessed as a competent ally who could follow instructions under pressure. Together, They represented a combination of skill, strategy, and courage capable of navigating the dangers that lay ahead. Every moment, every decision, reinforced the necessity of cooperation, discipline, and trust. As they prepared to move into the final segment of the base, the tension remained high. Shadows stretched long along the walls, distant footsteps echoed faintly, and the unknown waited just beyond each turn, but felt a sense of confidence he had never experienced before. With Riley Morgan by his side, he understood that survival was possible, that skill and experience could overcome even the most dangerous situations, and that he was witnessing the embodiment of a legend in action. And as they advanced toward the core of the operation, the bond forged in tension, recognition, and mutual respect would carry them through the imminent danger. Had moved from fear to awe, from tension to trust, and he knew that under Riley Morgan's guidance, they would face the unknown not as individuals, but as a synchronized unit capable of executing the impossible. The final segment of the base loomed ahead, a fortress within a fortress. The air was thick with tension, every shadow seeming to conceal potential threats. Captain Jonathan felt the weight of the mission like never before. He had followed Riley Morgan through corridors, avoided patrols, and witnessed firsthand the precision that had earned her legendary status. But the next steps, the heart of the operation, promised danger beyond anything he had ever faced. Every instinct screamed caution, every muscle tensed for the unknown. Riley moved first, her body low and controlled, every step deliberate, mirrored her as best he could, aware that even a single misstep could trigger alarms or worse. Riley's eyes scanned constantly, noting sensor angles, blind spots, and the faintest sound of movement. Her mind processed possibilities with lightning speed. How many guards, what routes they might take, which security systems could be bypassed, and how to neutralize threats efficiently. Had never seen such coordination. It was like watching a master conductor guiding an orchestra where the music was life or death. "This is it," Riley whispered, pausing behind a steel column. "Once we enter the core, the stakes rise. Timing, precision, and calm are everything. One mistake and we risk failure and our lives." Swallowed hard, gripping his weapon tightly, and nodded. He had come to trust Riley's judgment implicitly, and he knew that survival depended not just on skill, but on following her lead without hesitation. The entry point was a heavily reinforced door with multiple locks and a biometric scanner. Riley knelt, extracting a compact toolkit from her pack. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, bypassing the security measures in a sequence that seemed almost intuitive. Watched in awe as the door's locks clicked open silently, sensors temporarily disabled, and the way cleared. Years of training, countless missions, and intense focus had honed Riley's abilities to a level that seemed superhuman. They slipped inside, stepping into the core of the base. The room was massive, filled with consoles, monitors, and armed guards performing routine checks. Every movement was a potential trigger, every sound a potential alarm. Riley's eyes flicked across the room, noting positions, lines of sight, and possible escape routes. Followed closely, absorbing the methodical approach she used to assess threats, neutralize danger, and maintain control of the environment. It was tactical mastery in real time. Suddenly, a guard shifted, almost imperceptibly. Riley reacted instantly, moving with fluid precision, her hand striking a pressure point that sent the guard unconscious to the floor. Froze, astonished at the speed and efficiency of her action. The operation required both silence and speed. Any hesitation could have led to exposure. He realized now that Riley's legendary status was built not only on skill, but on the ability to execute decisions flawlessly under extreme pressure. They advanced deeper into the room, using shadows and cover to avoid detection. Riley's movements were a blend of observation, anticipation, and swift action. Began to understand her methodology. She created a mental map of the environment, predicted the movements of guards, and neutralized threats before they could respond. Every decision was calculated, every step deliberate, and every action carried a clear purpose. It was both terrifying and mesmerizing. A bank of monitors displayed live feeds from security cameras throughout the base. Riley approached quietly, disabling feeds one by one, her fingers moving with precision. Noted how she anticipated the guards, patrol patterns and timing, adjusting their path to remain unseen. Each second was a lesson in stealth and strategic thinking. Realized that following Riley was not just about survival, it was about absorbing knowledge that could redefine his understanding of tactical operations. The heart of the mission lay in a secure chamber at the far end of the room. Riley gestured for her to crouch as she scanned the hallway leading to the chamber. Sensors were positioned strategically, and armed guards rotated in unpredictable patterns. Riley's eyes flicked too, silently signaling that he needed to move exactly as she instructed. They advanced, step by step, shadow by shadow, timing their movements with precision. Felt his pulse race but found comfort in Riley's calm presence. Her confidence was infectious, her control absolute. Suddenly an alarm blared. A guard had triggered a pressure-sensitive floor panel. Riley reacted instantly, throwing a small smoke device that obscured vision and masked their movements. Covered her, firing 2 warning shots to divert attention. In moments, the room was chaos, but Riley's calm and calculated response maintained control. She guided through the smoke, navigating obstacles, avoiding detection and neutralizing threats. The legendary SEAL he had once recognized from reports was now a living, breathing force in front of him, a master of both strategy and execution. They reached the secure chamber, its door reinforced and alarmed. Riley crouched beside it, analyzing the lock system. Her fingers moved with practiced skill, bypassing the security mechanism silently. Watched awestruck as the chamber door finally clicked open. Inside, sensitive intelligence awaited, the objective of the mission. Riley motioned for her to enter, checking for additional threats. They moved inside cautiously, ensuring every angle was covered. As they secured the chamber, began to comprehend the full scale of Riley's brilliance. Every step of the infiltration had been orchestrated with unparalleled skill, from observation to anticipation to execution. Her ability to remain calm under extreme pressure, adapt to unforeseen challenges, and neutralize threats efficiently was unparalleled. Realized that this was not just a tactical operation, it was a demonstration of mastery that few in history had achieved. Riley retrieved the intelligence, securing it in a compact device. Could see the satisfaction in her eyes, not pride, but the quiet contentment of a mission executed flawlessly. "Objective secured," she whispered, signaling that the most dangerous part of the operation was complete. Exhaled, relief mingling with admiration. The tension that had gripped him since the initial standoff now began to ease, replaced by respect and understanding of what it truly meant to witness a legend in action. But even as relief settled, the mission was far from over. Exfiltration required the same precision and strategic thinking as infiltration. Guards would soon realize the disturbance, and alarms could escalate at any moment. Riley turned to her, eyes sharp and commanding. "Stay alert," she said. "The hardest part is getting out. Every second counts. Follow my lead exactly." Nodded, understanding that survival depended not only on skill but on trust, coordination, and absolute focus. They retraced their path, moving silently through the corridors, using shadows, cover, and timing to avoid detection. Every movement, every breath was calculated, every action a continuation of the strategy that had guided them through the base. Felt the weight of each step, the knowledge that one mistake could unravel the entire operation. Yet with Riley leading, he felt a combination of fear and reassurance. The fear of the danger, the reassurance of unparalleled guidance. A final guard post blocked the last corridor to their exfiltration point. Riley assessed the situation instantly, calculating angles, timing, and environmental factors. With fluid precision, she neutralized the guards, creating a safe path for both of them. Marveled at her execution, understanding that he was witnessing skill, experience, and strategic brilliance in its form. Every move was deliberate, every action precise, every second critical. As they approached the exit, the tension that had gripped the base began to shift. Realized that he had survived the impossible, not just because of his training, but because of the unmatched skill and strategic mastery of Riley Morgan. Recognition, respect, and trust had evolved into a partnership forged under pressure, a bond that would define the outcome of the mission and leave an indelible mark on both of their lives. And as they slipped through the shadows toward freedom, understood a profound truth. Survival in the most extreme conditions was not solely about courage, strength, or skill. It was about alignment with brilliance, the willingness to learn, and the capacity to trust someone whose expertise surpassed imagination. Riley Morgan was that person, and under her guidance, the impossible had become possible. The night air was crisp as Captain Jonathan and Riley Morgan emerged from the shadows of the base, the hum of alarms fading behind them. Every muscle in his body was tense, still adjusting from the adrenaline that had coursed through him for what felt like hours. He stole a glance at Riley, expecting exhaustion, but instead found calm determination, a quiet confidence that came from years of surviving situations far deadlier than this. She moved with the same precision and control that had carried them through every corridor, every hallway, every obstacle. Exhaled slowly, relief mingling with awe. Recognition of Riley's legendary status had transformed into an understanding of her mastery. Every step of the mission, from the standoff that had begun the night to the meticulous infiltration of the base, had demonstrated skills he had only ever read about in intelligence reports. Her calm under pressure, strategic foresight, and unmatched tactical expertise had saved their lives countless times over. He realized that, while he had faced danger before, nothing had prepared him for witnessing brilliance of this magnitude firsthand. "Captain," Riley said softly, her voice carrying that same quiet authority, "the mission is complete, but don't underestimate the importance of caution until we're fully clear. Threats can linger even after objectives are secured." Nodded, his respect deepening with every word. He had learned more in one night following Riley than in years of standard operations, and he understood that survival required a combination of skill, trust, and discipline, a lesson Riley had at every turn. As they moved toward extraction, reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had begun with a tense standoff, a moment in which his own instincts had almost endangered them both. Yet through that encounter, he had witnessed something extraordinary, the calm and controlled reaction of a person whose training, experience, and instinct made the impossible possible. Riley Morgan had transformed from a name in classified files to a living legend, a figure whose presence commanded respect and awe. The extraction point came into view, a secluded clearing where a tactical vehicle waited. Riley signaled to remain quiet as she assessed the perimeter, confirming no pursuit or additional threats. Marveled at her attention to detail, her ability to maintain focus even after the intensity of the mission. Every action she took was deliberate, precise, and informed by experience that went beyond ordinary training. He realized that her legend was not just about past achievements. It was about mastery in real time, the ability to operate flawlessly under pressure. Once inside the vehicle, finally allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought about the missions Riley had undertaken, the covert rescues, the infiltration behind enemy lines, the near-impossible feats of strategy and combat that had become whispered legends among operatives. Tonight, he had seen that legend in action, and he understood for the first time why her name inspired both reverence and fear. Riley was not merely a skilled operator. She was an embodiment of excellence, discipline, and calculated bravery. As the vehicle moved silently away from the base, Riley broke the silence. "Captain, tonight demonstrated something crucial. Survival depends not just on training, but on awareness, anticipation, and trust. You followed well, but remember this. Experience cannot be replaced. Learn from it, respect it, and let it guide your decisions in the future." Nodded, absorbing every nuance of her words. He realized that the mission had been as much a test and a lesson as it had been a tactical operation. The adrenaline that had coursed through him was gradually fading, replaced by a profound respect. Looked at Riley, noting the quiet resilience in her posture. There was no boastfulness, no arrogance, just mastery. She had navigated danger with a calm that bordered on serenity, neutralized threats with precision, and executed strategy with a level of foresight few could comprehend. Understood that legends were not created through luck or circumstance, but through relentless discipline, skill, and the unwavering ability to act decisively when it mattered most. He remembered the initial standoff, the moment his gun had been poised at her head. It was almost surreal now to consider how close he had been to committing a mistake that could have changed everything. Riley's calm, unflinching response had diffused the situation without confrontation. That moment had set the stage for the lessons he would learn through the mission: patience, observation, and the importance of trusting someone whose experience surpassed his own. Realized that survival often depended more on restraint and calculation than on brute force or instinct. The extraction route was clear, and the vehicle moved through quiet streets away from the base. Took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. He reflected on how much he had learned in such a short period, the insights he had gained into tactical strategy, human instinct, and the subtle mastery of operations that few ever witnessed. Riley had taught him, without lecturing, how to navigate life-or-death scenarios with clarity, precision, and calm, a lesson far more valuable than any training manual could convey. Finally, they reached a secure location, far from the danger of the base. Riley motioned for her to exit the vehicle and follow her to a safe room. Inside, she reviewed the intelligence they had secured, cross-referencing it with strategic objectives and mission requirements. Observed silently, recognizing the sheer mental acuity required to process and analyze data under pressure. Her mind was as disciplined and precise as her physical actions, a combination that had made her legendary among Navy SEALs and intelligence operatives alike. "Captain," Riley said, breaking the silence, "tonight you saw the difference between skill and mastery. Many trained, few excel, and even fewer survive intact in situations like these. Remember the lessons: anticipation, precision, and trust. They are as vital as your weapon or physical skill." Nodded, his respect deepening. He understood that this night had changed him, not just as an officer, but as a person who had witnessed the living embodiment of human potential under extreme conditions. For the first time, allowed himself to consider the magnitude of what they had accomplished. The base had been infiltrated, the intelligence secured, and they had survived unscathed. Each step of the operation had tested his instincts, judgment, and endurance. And throughout it all, Riley Morgan had been the guiding force, the embodiment of control, skill, and strategic brilliance. He understood now why her legend endured. It was not merely her past achievements, but her ability to execute flawlessly in the present. The night slowly gave way to early morning light, casting a gentle glow through the secure room's windows. Stood quietly, observing Riley as she continued to analyze data, her focus unbroken. There was no celebration, no fanfare, only quiet determination. He realized that true mastery was not about recognition or accolades, but about execution, discipline, and the ability to act decisively when it mattered most. Riley's legend was not a story. It was a living reality, and he had been privileged to witness it. Finally, Riley turned to him, her expression calm but resolute. "We did what we had to do, Captain. The mission is complete, but remember this night. It is a lesson, a test, and a reminder of what excellence looks like under pressure." Nodded, his thoughts a mix of awe, relief, and gratitude. He knew that the experience would stay with him forever, shaping his approach to command, strategy, and the understanding of human capability. As they exited the secure room and prepared to leave the facility, realized a simple truth: survival and success were not merely about training or instinct. They were about alignment with skill, trust, and mastery. Riley Morgan was that skill, that mastery, and that living legend. He had followed her, learned from her, and survived alongside her. And in doing so, he had witnessed the extraordinary potential of human discipline, courage, and brilliance. The mission had ended, the danger past, but the lessons endured. Would carry the memory of this night, the presence of Riley Morgan, and the awe-inspiring mastery she demonstrated into every future operation, every decision, and every challenge. He had seen legend in action, and it had changed him forever.